Namaste, Dandavat Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're also paying our humble obeisance to Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for providing us this wonderful commentary and translation of Bhagavatam. Also, following the guidance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we are praying to Srimati Radharani. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told us if we cannot discover something about Srimati Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Bhagavatam, then our study has been pointless. So, we are praying to Srimati Radharani. Yadi seva vanchitasyama yasya kripaya vayam labema sarvam prapnuma prayojanam damni Shri Bhagavat Pade Krishna sambandhi sarvam cha yadina janimahe tutam ashtadashasu sahasreshu shlokanam Bhagavat oktishu radharanimna vindamatada nishvalam Bhagavat adhyayanam radhikaya kripam vina vyartasyat sarva parishrama. If we are cheated out of serving that personality whose mercy towards us awards us everything we need, including residence in the Lord's holy Dham and all things connected to Krishna, and if we cannot understand or discover Radharani within the 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then our study of Bhagavatam has been pointless. Without the mercy of Srimati Radharani, all our efforts are in vain. So we are continuing our reading from Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 28, Purañjana becomes a woman in the next life. Text 43. Patim paramha dharmagyam vadbharhi malayadvajam premna paryacharaditva bogansa pati devata. The daughter of King Vidarbha accepted her husband all in all as the supreme. She gave up all sensual enjoyment and in complete renunciation followed the principles of her husband who was so advanced. Thus she remained engaged in his service. Purport. Figuratively, King Malayadvaja is the spiritual master, and his wife, Vidarbhi, is the disciple. The disciple accepts the spiritual master as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in Gaurvastaka, Sakshad Dharit Vena, one directly accepts the Guru, the spiritual master, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should accept the spiritual master not in the sense that the Mayavadi philosophers do, but in the way recommended here. Since the spiritual master is the most confidential servant of the Lord, he should be treated exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual master should never be neglected or disobeyed like an ordinary person. If a woman is fortunate enough to be the wife of a pure devotee, she can serve her husband without any desire for sense gratification. If she remains engaged in the service of her exalted husband, she will automatically attain the spiritual perfections of her husband. If a disciple gets a bona fide spiritual master simply by satisfying him, he can attain a similar opportunity to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 44. Chiravasa vratakshama veni bhuta shiroha Abhavupapatim shanta sikha shantam idanalam. The daughter of King Vidarbha wore old garments, and she was lean and thin because of her vows of austerity. Since she did not arrange her hair, it became entangled and twisted in locks. Although she remained always near her husband, she was as silent and unagitated as the flame of an undisturbed fire. Purport. When one begins to burn firewood, there is smoke and agitation in the beginning. Although there are so many disturbances in the beginning, once the fire is completely set, the firewood burns steadily. Similarly, when both husband and wife follow the regulative principles of austerity, they remain silent and are not agitated by sex impulses. At such a time, both husband and wife are benefited spiritually. One can attain this stage of life by completely giving up luxurious mode of life. In this verse, the word chiravasa refers to very old, torn garments. The wife especially should remain austere, not desiring luxurious dresses and living standards. She should accept only the bare necessities of life and minimize her eating and sleeping. There should be no question of mating. Simply by engaging in the service of her exalted husband, who must be a pure devotee, the wife will never be agitated by sex impulses. The Vanaprastha stage is exactly like this. Although the wife remains with the husband, she undergoes severe austerities and penances, so that although both husband and wife live together, there is no question of sex. In this way, both husband and wife can live together perpetually. Since the wife is weaker than the husband, this weakness is expressed in this verse with the words upapatim. Upa means near to or almost equal to. Being a man, the husband is generally more advanced than his wife. Nonetheless, the wife is expected to give up all luxurious habits. She should not even dress nicely or comb her hair. Her combing is one of the main businesses of women, hair combing. In the Vanaprastha stage, the wife should not take care of her hair. Thus her hair will become tangled in knots. Consequently, the wife will no longer be attractive to the husband, and she herself will no longer be agitated by sex impulses. In this way, both husband and wife can advance in spiritual consciousness. This advanced stage is called Paramahamsa stage, and once it is obtained, both husband and wife can be actually liberated from bodily consciousness. If the disciple remains steady in the service of the spiritual master, he need no longer fear falling down into the clutches of Maya. Text 45. Ajanati priyatamam yadho paratam angana shustira shanam ashadya yatha purvam upacharat. The daughter of King Vidarbha continued as usual to serve her husband, who was seated in a steady posture until she could ascertain that he had passed away from the body. Purport. It appears that the queen did not even talk to her husband while serving. She would simply perform her prescribed duties without talk. Thus she did not stop rendering service until she could ascertain that her husband had passed from the body. Text 46. Yadhano pala betangrav ushmanam patyur archati asit samvegna hridaya yuta brasta mragiyata. Translation. While she was serving her husband by massaging his legs, she could feel that his feet were no longer warm and could thus understand that he had already passed from the body. She felt great anxiety upon being left alone. Bereft of her husband's company, she felt exactly as the deer feels upon being separated from its mate. Purport. As soon as the circulation of blood and air within the body stops, it is to be understood that the soul within the body has left. The stoppage of the blood circulation is perceived when the hands and feet lose heat. One tests whether a body is alive or not by feeling the heart's palpitations and the coldness of the feet and hands. Text 47. Atmanam sochati dinam abhandum vikla vashrubi stanav asitya vipine shusvaram prarurodasa. Being now alone and a widow in that forest, the daughter of Vidarbha began to lament, incessantly shedding tears which soaked her breasts and crying very loudly. Purport. Figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated, because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of vani, words. Physical presence is called vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciple should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciple should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. Text 48. Utisto tista rajarshe imam udhati mekalam dasyubhya kshatra bandhubhyo bibhyatim patum arhasi. O best of kings, please get up, get up. Just see this world surrounded by water and infested with rogues and so-called kings. This world is very much afraid, and it is your duty to protect her. Purport. Whenever an acharya comes, following the superior orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or his representative, he establishes the principle of religion, as enunciated in the Bhagavad Gita. Religion means abiding by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Religious principles begin from the time one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is the acharya's duty to spread a bona fide religious system and induce everyone to bow down before the Supreme Lord. One executes the religious principles by rendering devotional service, specifically the 9 items like hearing, chanting, and remembering. Unfortunately, when the acharya disappears, rogues and non-devotees take advantage and immediately begin to induce unauthorized principles in the name of so-called swamis, yogis, philanthropists, welfare workers, and so on. Actually, human life is meant for executing the orders of the Supreme Lord, and this is stated in Bhagavad Gita 9.34. Manmanha bhavamad bhakto mad yaghi mam namaskuru mam evaisyasi yukvaivam atmanam mat parayana. Engage your mind always in thinking of me and become my devotee. Offer obeisances and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. The main business of human society is to think of the Supreme Personality of Godhead at all times, to become his devotees, to worship the Supreme Lord, and to bow down before him. The Acharya, the authorized representative of the Supreme Lord, establishes these principles, but when he disappears, things once again become disordered. The perfect disciples of the Acharya try to relieve the situation by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. At the present moment, practically the entire world is afraid of rogues and non-devotees. Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement is started to save the world from irreligious principles. Everyone should cooperate with this movement in order to bring about actual peace and happiness in the world. Text 49. Evam vilapanti bala vipine nugata patim patita padayor bartu Rudhatya Shrunya Bhartayat. The most obedient wife thus fell down at the feet of her dead husband and began to cry pitifully in that solitary forest. Thus the tears rolled down from her eyes. Purport. Just as a devoted wife becomes afflicted at the passing away of her husband, when the spiritual master passes away, the disciple becomes similarly bereaved. Text 50. Chitim darumayam chitva tasyam patyu kalevaram adipya chanumarane vilapanti manodade. She then prepared a blazing fire with firewood and placed the dead body of her husband upon it. When this was finished, she lamented severely and prepared herself to perish in the fire with her husband. Purport. It is the long-standing tradition of the Vedic system that a faithful wife dies along with her husband. This is called Saha Marana. In India, this system was prevalent even to the date of the British occupation. At that time, however, a wife who did not wish to die with her husband was sometimes forced to do so by her relatives. Formerly, that was not the case. The wife used to enter the fire voluntarily. The British government stopped this practice, considering it inhumane. However, from the early history of India, we find that when Maharaj Pandu died, he was survived by two wives, Madri and Kunti. The question was whether both should die or one should die. After the death of Maharaj Pandu, his wives settled that one would remain and the other would go. Madri would perish with her husband in the fire, and Kunti would remain to take charge of the 5 Pandava children. Even as late as 1936, we saw a devoted wife voluntarily enter the fire of her husband. This indicates that a devotee's wife must be prepared to act in such a way. Similarly, a devoted disciple of the spiritual master would rather die with the spiritual master than fail to execute the spiritual master's mission. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down upon this earth to re-establish the principles of religion, so his representative, the spiritual master, also comes to re-establish religious principles. It is the duty of the disciples to take charge of the mission of the spiritual master and execute it properly. Otherwise, the disciple should decide to die along with the spiritual master. In other words, to execute the will of the spiritual master, the disciple should be prepared to lay down his life and abandon all personal considerations. Text 51. Tatra purvatara kaschit sakha brahmana atmavan Shandvayan Valguna Samna Tam Aharuda Tim Prabho. My dear king, one Brahmana who was an old friend of King Purañjana came to that place and began to pacify the queen with sweet words. Purport. The appearance of an old friend in the form of a Brahmana is very significant. In his Paramatma feature, Krishna is the old friend of everyone. According to Vedic injunction, Krishna is sitting with the living entity side by side. According to the Shruti mantra, Dva Suparna Sayujashakyaha, the Lord is sitting within the heart of every living entity as Surit, the best friend. The Lord is always eager to have the living entity come home, back to Godhead. Sitting with the living entity as witness, the Lord gives him all chances to enjoy himself materially. But whenever there is an opportunity, the Lord gives good counsel and advises the living entity to abandon trying to become happy through material adjustment, and instead turns his face toward the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrender to him. When one becomes serious to follow the mission of the spiritual master, his resolution is tantamount to seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained before, this means meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the instruction of the spiritual master. This is technically called Vani Seva. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Bhagavad Gita commentary on the verse Vyavasyatmika Buddhir Ikehe Vyavasayatmika buddhir ikkeha kuru nandana, Bhagavad Gita 2.41, that one should serve the words of the spiritual master. The disciple must stick to whatever the spiritual master orders. Simply by following on that line, one sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Paramatma, appeared before the queen as a Brahmana. But why didn't he appear in his original form as Sri Krishna? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that unless one is very highly elevated in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot see him as he is. Nonetheless, if one sticks to the principles enunciated by the spiritual master, somehow or other he is in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Since the Lord is in the heart, he can advise the sincere disciple from within. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10.10. Tesham satata yuktanam vajitam priti purvakam tadhami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. In conclusion, if a disciple is very serious to execute the mission of the spiritual master, he immediately associates with the Supreme Personality of Godhead by Avani or Vapu. This is the only secret of success in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Instead of being eager to see the Lord in some bush of Vrindavan while at the same time engaging in sense gratification, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. Srila Bilva Mangala Thakur has therefore said, Bhakti stvahi Bhagavan yadisyad darvenana phalati divya kishora murti mukti svayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharmartha kama gataya shamaya pratiksha. If I am engaged in devotional service unto you, my dear Lord, then very easily I can perceive your presence everywhere. As far as liberation is concerned, I think that liberation stands at my door with folded hands, waiting to serve me, and all material conveniences of dharma, religiosity, artha, economic development, and kama, sense gratification, stand with her. Krishna Karanamrita 107. If one is very highly advanced in devotional service, he will have no difficulty in seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one engages in the service of the spiritual master, he not only sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but attains liberation. As far as material conveniences are concerned, they automatically come, just as the maidservants of a queen follow the queen wherever she goes. Liberation is no problem for the pure devotee, and all material conveniences are simply awaiting him at all stages of life. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue from text 52 on Wednesday. Before we finish, were there any contributions or comments or questions from the assembled devotees? Anything?
Dandavad Paranams. Thank you very much indeed this morning. Dandavad Paranams, Uma Devi. Dandavad Paranams, Krishna Kesava. Thank you. Have a great day. Hare Krishna.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees, Sama Bhaktiveda Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ju Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ganga Mai, Yamuna Mai ki jai, Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Giri
Jai.
Govardhan, Kuta Govardhan Dham ki jai.
Jai.
Shyam Kund Radha Kund ki jai, Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda
Jai.
Devi ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jai Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki jai.
Jai.
Scientific Sankirtan Yagya ki jai.
Jai.
Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Gaura Premanandi Hari 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 Bo Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
श्रीपाद कृष्ण केशव प्रभु जी की जय।
Jai.
Dandavat Pranams. Hari Bo.